9, 12, 10, 28, 2, 23.
This is Deep State Radio.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm Marc Polymeropoulos, and this is DSR's Above Average Intelligence Show. Today, I am thrilled to welcome as my guest, Mr. Jeremy Hurewitz. Did I pronounce that correctly, Hurewitz?
You did, Mark. Right, as a fellow person with a difficult last name, I appreciate that.
But just a little bit of bio. First of all, author of the new book, Sell Like a Spy, The Art of Persuasion from the World of Espionage. I have the book right in front of me right here. It's outstanding, of course, mostly because I'm quoted in it. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But amazing book. And I think we're going to jump into a lot of the principles in that. But a little bit about our guest today. Jeremy is the creator, again, of Sell Like a Spy, the author of the book. It offers communication strategies and business development lessons sourced from the world of the CIA and other government agencies. It sounds kind of pretty spooky, and it is. But just as interestingly to me, of course, Jeremy spent the first decade of his career overseas building the Media Association Project Syndicate while based out of Prague and Shanghai. So a journalist background, and we'll jump into that a little bit because I think there's always a really interesting kind of similarities between journalists and CIA case officers. Also worked overseas as a freelance journalist. So really a tremendous resume. You're certainly involved now with global consulting firms in the world of corporate security. And you have a Rolodex of famous people, even more impressive than mine. But Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, the quick admission on this is I'm quoted in the book, so of course I like it and I heartily endorse it. Although I think it was in here I see you got like Cypher giving you a blurb. Like, this is my good buddy John Cypher. So I'm going to get crap for that. But again, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mark. Such a pleasure to be here, and you know how much I admire you and your service too.
No, I thank you. I appreciate it. Let's start off, and we'll jump into the book in a little bit, but there's something that I want to address, and I love this especially when I talk to authors or journalists who have who write about or in some sense, your case, refer to a lot of the intelligence business, but it's the idea of the similarities between case officers, what I was for the CIA, and journalists, which you did for a long time, and you joked in the book. People have accused you of being a spy. You were not. It's important to kind of make that distinction, but think about some of the things between the two professions. The use of sources and being very passionate with your work, needing multiple sources to write a story. The notions of trust, and of course, everything you talk about here, the notion of relationships. Do you see that same similarity? I suppose that I do.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's part of the reason I was drawn to this world, and that's why I started covering and focusing on the intelligence world even more during my time overseas. And I think you hit the nail on the head about some of those similarities, but also, and you mentioned John Cypher, we wrote a piece on Tim Walz, and unfortunately he's not going to be vice president, but how good a candidate he would be to deal with China because of all the years he spent there. And where I'm going with that is that both CIA case officers and journalists need to get comfortable culturally with some of the, with the foreign cultures that they're interacting in. And the more that they can become fluent in those areas, the better that they're going to be at doing their job. But I think you and I both know how difficult that could be. I remember being in China and how hard that was culturally as a really straightforward, candid New Yorker to navigate some of the cultural norms there. And I'm sure you face significant challenges in the Middle East as well. But there's a lot, you touched on it with developing sources, building trust. And then what I touch upon in the book is asking strategic questions. And actually asking questions that might kind of mask your specific, the specific intelligence, the specific information you want to get. So you become adept at that if you're doing your job well. But those are just a couple of thoughts to build on what you just mentioned.
Let me ask. I'm gonna throw out a kind of. I think I'm gonna get this right. This is my old age kind of coming in here. Is it adjectives? I don't even know what I'm saying here. But there's. Or how about just good qualities for both. A journalist and a case officer, or even in your sense, someone right now, what you're doing in terms of as an educator. Humility. What do you think of that?
Humility is really important, and it's hard, to as a younger man, especially when you're gallivanting around the world, to sort of remember to be humble when all this, crazy stuff is going on, and you feel like, you're leading a great life. But life teaches you humility. I know it's taught me that, and the more that you can, humble yourself, especially when it comes to developing a source, as again a journalist, a spy, whatever, the more you can be kind of that, or turn off the kind of alpha male thing where you need to dominate a conversation and just be a great listener, which I write about extensively in the book, which is extremely challenging. That will help, and humility is a great wellspring to pull that from.
Let me ask you a question. Did you ever watch that? Why am I blanking on this now? The famous show about soccer in England. What's wrong with me?
Oh yeah, the comedic one.
Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso.
Yes,
Jeez, I must have jet lag. I was just in the UK.
Yeah.
So there's a great scene there where he's playing darts. I don't know if you remember that in his kind of the
vaguely, yeah.
Game there, but it's the notion of what's a great trait in someone. It's the idea of being curious.
Yep.
What do you think of that? Just in terms of curiosity, and let me just kind of preface it. Well, let me just throw in there that when I talk to young students going to university who are interested in the intelligence business, these are the things I talked about. Curiosity and humility, but your notion of curiosity, I would think that's what drove you a lot of the times as you're running around Asia.
Yeah, absolutely. Curiosity is a huge part of being a good journalist. I used to just love what I did, especially as a freelancer, which had its challenges. But being a freelancer, I could get excited about a story and then, pitch it and find a venue for it. But it led to me being able to just get excited about just different stories and run with it versus having an editor assign things. So one of the things that impressed me working in the field of corporate security with, folks with your background, Mark, is the intellectual curiosity. And I describe it as being intellectually omnivorous. I so many times, especially going into like high powered hedge funds or private equity firms, walking in with a former case officer who was able to, pivot from talking about golf to talking about like esoteric, music and then all sorts of things. You guys are able to be so flexible and curious and humble at the right time too. When you don't know about something, pivoting from either knowing and being broad about certain subjects to being curious about it. And I even have an anecdote. We mentioned Cypher earlier about, him talking about training at the farm and being paired up with someone with a drastically different background to cultivate that person. I think in his case, it was a hunter. He's not a hunter. He didn't come from that background. And he had to engage in a conversation with that person to make that person feel respected, seen, understood. So you have to cultivate that intellectual curiosity if you really want to be successful with these communication strategies.
I like that too. And we'll talk just a little bit later about some of the practices of being curious and being humble, which has to do with listening. But we'll hold that thought just for a second. I want to, again, when you told me a while ago and you interviewed me for the book and I see it comes out now, I mean, this is something, something tangible you have now. So I guess the first question, because I want to talk about the process of writing the book, but why did you write the book? Why did you think, because you're very successful in what you do. But was there a thought, okay, I need something tangible to kind of hook this into. I want to be able to reach a larger audience rather than just your corporate clients.
There's a couple things. When I went overseas when I was 22, it was with a backpack and a guitar, and I wanted to be some form of like Ernest Hemingway meets Kurt Cobain, and I still carry those dreams with me big time. Look, I had 3 failed novels before this book came out, and now I have 2 kind of under my belt that my agent is shopping, and I hope that they work out a little bit better. One is a spy one's kind of a literary thing that I'm finishing. But I've always wanted to write books. So to answer your question, that's really at the heart of it. I think I'm one of those people that during COVID said, you know what, I don't ever want to go back to an office again. I don't really want to work for anybody full time again. So I work part time now for a corporate intelligence firm called Intrafor International, but I run my own business. I speak and I write. And the book, is the result of my work in corporate intelligence and prior to that covering foreign policy and intelligence, of my deep admiration for public servants. I never served in the military. I was never, a case officer, but I have a lot of admiration for those who serve their country. So I feel really honored and humbled to be able to shine a spotlight on those folks. And I guess the core aspect of why I wrote the book is that watching folks like yourself, and I alluded to this earlier, go into meetings, cultivate people at networking events, watch them, use their abilities on me to influence me. really, shaped how I communicate with people, how I sell, how I grow relationships. So I'd been thinking about this for many years, and I decided, you know what, now's the time to give it a shot. And the book is the result of that.
That's funny. Yeah, a good friend of mine, I won't mention her name, but she's a very well-known journalist, and she wrote a big story about me a long time ago. And then the joke we have now is that she goes, I think you manipulated me along the way. And I said, that's not true. No, but I think one of the things that is a trait of a successful case officer is certainly is the ability to not only have a wide ranging bunch of interests, but you also kind of tailor it to your audience too. I mean, I would joke with our officers in the station. If our target, let's see, it was a Chinese MFA officer, loves bird watching, guess what you're going to become expert at? Bird watching. And it sometimes it's okay to do that, but I think that kind of targeted approach, if in the business world, is very much the same. I mean, there's the worst thing you do is go to a diplomatic reception without an idea, without a plan,
right?
Without some kind of idea of who's there. What do you want to talk about? And like everything else in life, the importance, if you do have someone in mind to get close to, you want a second meeting.
Yeah,
I would imagine those things all translate. Let me just ask you, and I think because the listeners, there's parts of this, the nuances people really enjoy, but the process of writing a book. I mean, first of all, let's say, this is a book here, is something tangible. You will always be proud of this, but it's also a labor of love. And a good buddy of mine, David McCloskey, who's written some espionage law.
Sure, I've read him.
We have this really funny back and forth all the time on this because it's hard. What is it? Is it 1,000 words a day? And maybe you get it done. Maybe you send it in. Your editor craps all over it, which is what editors do. There's huge ups and downs in this. What was it like in the process of writing the book? Was it difficult? Were there some times you're like, I nailed it? Were there other times you're like, oh my God, this stinks? And then of course it comes out this incredible product. It's your baby now, but it ain't easy.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think all that stuff is correct, and I want to exercise humility here because I have deep faults in some aspects as a writer. I think I'm a much better writer than I am editor, for instance, especially of my own work. But what I can say is that because I've been sitting with the material for so long, and even doing already some speaking, some training, I had a lot of what I wanted to write in mind and kind of broken out with a good proposal. I have a terrific agent at Aevitis Creative Management, Michael Signorelli. And so I had really had a game plan. And so I wrote the book actually quite fast. I think it was 3 or 4 months. And, and then, the editor at Diversion Books, the two editors, Keith Wallman and Claire Linoff, were great. They didn't tear me apart too much. They just made it better, and that was really terrific. So I think that's a pretty common path that you're talking about here. But I'm a fast writer. We've talked about the op-eds I write for like The Hill and other things, and I dash those off. And because I'm a New Yorker and I'm always in a hurry, so I do things kind of fast. Same with the novels I've been writing. I write fast, so I'm a little bit of an outlier in that way. Not that it's easy, but it's also a huge labor of love for me. I love writing. The discovery of it, the way one sentence leads to another, the way your intellect carries you is just, I play music as well. And it's one of the greatest joys to allow your intellect, your subconscious to merge with your conscious and to actually do something. So I take a huge amount of joy and pride in it.
All right, so you mentioned you're a New Yorker. We do have to raise kind of baseball. So I can't remember. You're a Mets or a Yankees fan?
Oh, Mark, come on, man! I told you I've been trolling you on Twitter, about your Red Sox fandom. I'm a huge Yankee fan, so I want to grab a beer with you and watch a game, and ideally a Red Sox Yankee game, and we'll arm wrestle or something like that.
I went to that horrible game at the end of the year where the Red Sox were barely still in it, and they had the lead, and then Aaron Judge hit that grand slam. I was at Yankee Stadium there, and and my old outfit actually helped get me tickets right behind home plate. But what I didn't do, I was kind of a wimp. I didn't wear any Red Sox stuff there.
Oh, well, I don't blame you there. I mean, I once, did that at Fenway Park, and I'm glad I didn't lose my life, and then other times not even wearing the gear, I felt like I was in, a denied area, you might say, or something, it's intense.
The new Yankee Stadium, though, is gorgeous, and the food was fantastic. That place is beautiful. Getting up there on the subway is a nightmare. It always I remember that. But I will, okay, so the last piece on this, we'll get back to, obviously I want to promote your book. Juan Soto, is he staying or is he going to go across town to the Mets? The Red Sox, by the way, have no chance, and I'm at total bullshit. They're just toying with my emotions.
Yeah, I think it's Yankees Mets. And yesterday we had some news from Steinbrenner kind of, talking a big game about we can sign anyone we want. So yes, the 2 days before I was feeling, oh man, Cohen's going to just, pay whatever it takes. And now I think that, the Yankees have a really good chance. And I think if Soto is smart, he'll stick with the Yanks.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. I'm shocked if he would leave. 650, 700 million. What's it going to be? What's the contract?
It doesn't mean much abstractly, but the question of $50 million. And I think it's also a sense of ego with these guys getting the most amount of money. I think that's the bigger deal, and Soto has a healthy ego. Yeah.
Well, he's a heck of a player. I was at the 2019 wild card game where Soto hit that incredible comeback. They beat the Brewers. That was one of the craziest fan moments at Nats Park of all places.
Yeah, he's awesome. And as you note in the book, I talk a lot about baseball, and it's one of I enjoy doing that because it's a way I connect with people, and I talk to people about leaning into their passions and superpowers as I describe it. So baseball's one of them.
All right, let's dive into the book right now. Again, as I obviously I read it a while ago. I read it again. And of course, I look for the parts where I'm quoted.
Of course.
But let me just start off overall, because there is a huge element of kind of the corporate world here. This is your audience. Mm-hmm. Many people are your audience, but what is the business community, the corporate world's fascination with espionage? Obviously, you've tapped into something that is important on this. And by the way, one of the things I like is that you were not a member of the intelligence community, yet you wrote this book. And so there's a part of that which then allows you to kind of tap into your vast network of military and intelligence contacts. But what is it, the corporate world fascination with espionage? Why?
I think that I don't see it as just the corporate world. I think it's, everybody loves spies, and that's because... Yeah, I guess you're right. But that's because of some of the misconceptions in part, and I start off every talk I do by dispelling the misconceptions that, despite, Mark being able to bench press a lot of weight, he's not Jason Bourne. You know what I mean? You don't have superhuman powers, and there's very few James Bonds out there driving an Aston Martin and engaged in car chases and seduction and all of that. That's not the way the intelligence world works. But, people have this romance about it and the mystery and the intrigue. So I think that, the corporate world can get quite banal and every day feels the same. So people romanticize the world of intelligence officers and think they're living a life that is, a dream that they don't want, that they would want to live. And it's kind of a blessing and a curse in the talks when I dispel the misconceptions and I say, hey, case officers, they might do some incredible things and occasionally find themselves in a dangerous situation. But day to day, they're more like an elite relationship manager. They're handling an agent who's the one collecting the intelligence. And guys like you, Mark, sometimes think of the agents as the actual spies and yourself as more like a relationship manager. I know you and I talked about how you felt like a therapist at times. You have to work with these people and get them to feel comfortable with what they're doing in a similar way that a high-end account manager, with a client that spends millions with their company has to invest in that relationship and understand if they're feeling down about something. And, those are deep relationships. So those are the similarities that I try to tie in to get a corporate audience to, I want to give them a chance to think outside the box and give them new strategies about how to engage and do their job to make it fun, to make it, refreshed and reinvigorated.
So I'm going to throw something at you because this will actually be interesting. You can come back to me later on this. So when I go talk to universities, for example, and so someone asks me, what's the best classes we can take to prepare yourself for the intelligence community? Is it international relations, Middle East history, Asian history? And I say, no. I say it's psychology because it's about relationships. So I wonder if, as you deal with the kind of the business world where you will have people with MBAs and other things like that, I mean, I bet some of the best in the business at this, whether they took classes on psychology, have a psychology background, but they would get that about them. It's because it's not a Psych 101 class; it's a Psych 501 class. Ultimately, and relationships are certainly everything.
Absolutely agree. And understanding psychology and even more specifically behavioral science, I think powers a lot of the ways you can be successful with these techniques. So, for instance, when I write about elicitation, there's a lot of triggers that will cause people to give you information they might not necessarily think about giving you. Just the basic example is, hey, Mark, your favorite color is blue, right? And you'd say, no, my favorite color is not blue, it's red, because there is a strong tendency to correct in human beings. We are hardwired because we're all vain. We will correct the record about anything about ourselves. So, there are outliers, of course, there always are. Human beings are so varied, but even more than 9 times out of 10, probably 98% of the time, the person you say that to will correct the record about themselves. So there are subtle psychological methods that can cause people to be influenced and for you to get what you need from them.
One of the things in the book where you talk about is active listening, something I think you and I discussed as well.
We did, yeah.
It's in there. And that, there was, I'm not sure if the quote was in there for me, but I remember a senior manager telling me, the quote was, if you're talking, you ain't listening.
Yeah.
And what he really said to me was, shut the F up. And it was just hard for people. I've been in the business community, but also, certainly for myself, who's, a type A personality, like there's a time, what I'm not doing right now is letting you talk. See, I'm doing it. But it's let your interlocutor speak. That's really important. Talk about active listening and why you think that's so crucial.
Yeah, well, I so appreciated your feedback in the book there because, spies like, the rest of the world and the business community certainly come from all walks of life, right? And there are, I remember I'm thinking of one in particular that I worked with in corporate security, a lapsed Mormon who was very much an introvert and would make you, feel like you were the most interesting person in the world as you were talking. That's one side of it. And then there's you, you're a little bit more gregarious and that has major benefits in some respects, but you related, and it's in the book about how challenging it is for you at times to be a great active listener, but especially during moments in your career when whether you're in I think you quoted as being in a back alley and you need to very quickly ascertain a piece of information, being a great listener is really important. And I describe being an active listener as the most important skill a spy, as a journalist, a salesperson could have. Because I ask audiences frequently, I pause after I ask it and I say, think of the best listener you've ever experienced. And people sit for a minute and I say, I bet you have a really high opinion of that person, right? And they always do, because what happens when we feel listened to? We feel respected, we feel seen, we feel understood. And if you ask clarification questions and you encourage that person to go on, and you're a journalist, a salesperson, or a spy, you're going to get more information as they just continue to share. And they feel flattered, they feel engaged. But we have enormous evolutionary challenges related to active listening, which I write about in the book. And I think one of the easiest to understand that, we come from primitive man. And when language was developing, our ability to comprehend evolved very quickly compared to our ability to speak, because, when the cavemen were surveying the savannah, they had to very quickly hear what someone had to say or grunt, whatever it was, because they were on the lookout for something they could kill and eat or something that wanted to kill and eat them. So we comprehend 4 times faster than our ability to speak, which is a major challenge when you're talking to somebody and they're rambling on, perhaps like I'm doing now, and where that person is going. Some people even finish your sentence for you. So I write about this in the book, where there are challenges we need to overcome to become that great active listener. And there's no trick that you can engage in to, become very quickly a great active listener. You have to commit yourself to, as I described it, developing an active listening practice and really kind of force yourself to do it.
I have a terrible habit. It drives my wife crazy, of interrupting people. So there's so many funny things what I do in life now, where my wife always says, you really don't practice what you preach. So this idea, I don't.
Happens to the best of us.
I know. But okay, I remember this. As you're talking about this now, I remember an operational meeting I had. It was a developmental meeting. It was against a target who I just met. And we spoke, and I was practicing active listening. And I think in about a 20-minute conversation at a diplomatic reception, I said maybe 5 words.
Yeah.
And afterwards, we walked off, and the interlocutor said, "That was a great discussion we had." And I never forgot that, because I really said nothing.
Yeah.
But the whole idea is, I said, "Well, I'd love to get together again." And they said, "I got it. I got that second meeting." But I maybe said I had 5% of the dialogue in this, and I think that's so interesting, because when the person you're speaking with walks away, and I suppose there's a sense of empowerment that they have, but whatever it is, it was really interesting to me, because I said so little. Yet they thought this individual thought it was a great discussion.
People say if you just sit there and listen and kind of barely answering good questions, they'll call you a great conversationalist, right. And you didn't even say anything of interest. People are just so flattered to be listened to, and you can augment that even further by using their name when you say a clarification question, because again, people are vain, and if you grab somebody's name when you initially start talking to them, that is even more challenging. I put up like a little meme in my talks where someone's going, I forgot their name right away, and everyone says, I'm so bad with names. Again, this relates to primitive man. When we meet somebody, we're looking at them and thinking, are they a friend, a foe? Are they a potential love interest? Where do they fit in my social hierarchy? And the name is superfluous, and it goes in one ear and out the other. But if you can train yourself to grab a hold of names and then you start using it in the brief amount of times you're speaking in that conversation, that takes it up in another level.
One of the things I do on TV hits all the time is, obviously, who, when I go on MSNBC and I'm, it's the anchor. I mean, the thing you do is you say, Jonathan, that's a great question. I mean, I do that constantly. And so, that engagement is really important. One thing on the book that I loved, and this is not a criticism at all, because I'm looking at this right now. It's a small book, and it is less than 200 pages. This is an airplane book. It's perfect. And so you take it, you go on a trip, and you read the whole thing. It's not intimidating. And the other part of it too, where I say it's an airplane book, it's the key takeaway section. That's the reference guide. It's literally as we all do. I have authors on all the time, and sometimes if I've had authors on a 500-page book, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'll say beforehand, I did not read this. I skimmed through it, but give me the cliff notes, because I have 6 people. But with your book, it's easy to read, and you have that takeaway section. Obviously, that was done deliberately, but I suppose give me your thoughts on why you did that, and maybe I answered the question for you just now, as I'm not practicing active listening.
Yeah, that was 100% my editor, Keith Wallman at Diversion Books. It was his idea. It was a really good one. In some ways, I describe the book sometimes as kind of a bit of a memoir too, about, my career and what I've done. And I'm proud of that. But we tried to craft also something of a handbook, that can be referred to, and that is important. So I like that it's like somewhat versatile, and I think you alluded to this earlier, with the idea, the title Sell Like a Spy has good and bad aspects of it, because it sounds like a sales or business book, but I want it to be a little bit of a memoir. And I've been on dating and relationship podcasts, because I think it's applicable to that, and God, men need the help, with active listening, and it's totally applicable to that. So, I really appreciate that. I wanted to make the book compelling. I wanted there to be great anecdotes, which, you were kind enough to share, and others. And I wanted it to be an easy read, but very useful as well. So I really appreciate that.
So another plug for this. So I actually I had a day trip to New York City yesterday. I had to run up and back same day, and took the Acela on Amtrak, and nearly broke me. 6 hours.
It's a long day, yeah.
But so I had your book with me, and so I plop it out, and I left it out there, with the title showing, and I fell asleep, and not because of the book, because I was on the train for 6 hours, but when I was reading it, everybody walks by and looks at it. So I would say, from the marketing perspective, it's a red cover, and it says "Sell Like a Spy," and everyone does a double take.
Cool. That's great to hear.
It's right there. Now, unfortunately, is the time, and the point in the podcast where we have to say goodbye to our guests who are not yet subscribers. If you want to listen to the rest of the podcast and to all of our other shows in full, just go to the dsrnetwork.com and click on membership. It's only $5 a month, and it brings you a lot of great bonus content. If you're not a subscriber, we hope you will be soon. Actually, I think it's $7. Let me change that again. Joe, our producer, will get mad at me. $7 a month. But if you're not a subscriber, we hope you will be soon. If you are one, stand by, and we'll be right back in a moment.